This is Dan and Lexi from Dan Shoalts Outdoors, reminding you to keep the adventures alive. Hey y'all, I'm Johnny.
And I'm Colleen. And we're the Keel Quest. And we want you to keep the adventures alive. Cheers!
Hey, this is Darren from Ride Paddle Repeat, encouraging you to keep the adventures alive.
This is David from Beachley Ironworks saying keep the adventures alive.
Hey, Kevin with an A here. Keep the adventure alive.
Hi, I'm Dan Mayotte. Keep the adventures alive.
Hi, I'm Kevin Collin, the Happy Camper. Remember, keep the adventures alive. Awesome!
Woo, buddy! Shug here! Keep the adventures alive. I am.
Ethan here, the avid outdoorsy guy, reminding you to keep the adventures alive.
We're John and Aaron.
Keep the adventures alive.
Hey everyone, it's Kylan from Lure of the North, and I encourage you to keep the adventures alive.
This is Sky North telling you, keep the adventures alive. And now on with the show.
Hey, happy Tuesday, and welcome to another episode of Canoehound's Outdoor Adventure Show, a show that's going to bring you a lot closer to the great outdoors. My name is Dennis, also known as Canoehound, and if this is your first time tuning into the show, thank you very much for joining us tonight. We've got a great show in store for you. Just want to let you know that we are here live every Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time now, and we're always bringing you hot topics and great guests, and just trying to occupy a couple hours of your Tuesday evening. Anyways, before we get on with tonight's guest, I would like to, of course, run through a few announcements while the chat over there populates, and that'll give us a bit of time for our guest to get settled into the basement down there. Just want to say that we're going to shout out a couple of our sponsors right now. First off, I'd like to shout out Algonquin Outfitters, who are currently celebrating their 60th anniversary in business. They are great outfitters serving 4 locations around Algonquin Park. They are currently running a contest. I've mentioned this over the past several weeks. I urge you to get yourself entered into this contest. There's some fantastic prizes, and if you're looking for the link to it, you'll find that in the description down below. So by all means, check out Algonquin Outfitters, their current contests that they have going on. I believe you have until the end of this month to get yourself entered, and then after that, some lucky winners are going to be announced. So yeah, don't you gotta have a ticket to win, right? So you want to take care of that. Anyways, also shout out to our friends over at Kid Products, makers of the Kid Twig Stove and Reflector Oven. Longtime supporters of Canoehound's Outdoor Adventure Show. If you're ever looking for a reflector oven or a twig stove, which are all Canadian made. Okay, that's the key thing there. They're made right here in Ontario, Canada. So by all means, check them out at www.kihdproducts.com, or you can find, once again, the link in the description below. Also, Hunter and Harris Paddles, makers of handcrafted, high-quality paddles. You know what? They handcraft some true pieces of art. So if you're ever in the market for a paddle, check out a Hunter and Harris paddle. They have 3 different styles to choose from right now. And you know what? Milan over there is a craftsman when it comes down to it. So you can check them out, hunterandharrispaddles.com, and pick up yours. Let's see here. Just wanted to, you know what, really quick. My good friends over at Paddling Adventures Radio this past week had their 300th episode. If you don't already follow them or their podcast, check them out on any podcast streaming platform. Not really up on that stuff, but I know I do listen to Paddling Adventures Radio. Derek Spesh and Sean Rowley, they put on a really good weekly show. And if you haven't heard it, tune in, because I'll tell you, you'll be hooked. It's a great listen whenever you're done with the bang bang of the rock and roll music or whatever it is you listen to on the radio. But you know what? Go ahead, check them out, and congratulate them, guys. Great effort. I believe 300 episodes, and I don't think they've missed a week. So congratulations, guys. That's awesome. Last week on our show, we had Jason Irwin from the YouTube channel Tumble Home. And we talked about a video that he just recently launched. And it was a much anticipated one because he doesn't put a lot of videos on YouTube, but when he does, they're the highest quality, and they're truly a pleasure to watch. And the video was called Harvesting Light, Canoes and Cameras on the Amazing French River. Great video. And we also shared a trailer of another video he's going to be coming out in the next while. So go over, check out Jason Irwin's channel called Tumble Home. And if you want to check out last week's show, just go to our season 3 playlist. It is available there for you to watch at any time. You can watch it in short bits, or you could watch the entire thing all at one time. He's always a great guy to have on the show. Thanks to everybody who submitted their answers for the weekly swag giveaway from last week's show. All your names are now in the pot for the month-end prize, which we'll be explaining a bit more at about the 8 o'clock hour tonight. Special thanks goes out to all of our channel members and those who shot us super chats last week. By shooting the super chats and the new channel members, we've included some stuff into the swag giveaway this week. Being one of the things is one of our new Canoehound Adventures coffee mugs, a nice 14-ounce mug here. So the lucky winner is going to be getting one of them. And this one's very hot because my wife just brought me down a coffee. Thank you, dear. You're a sweetheart. Also, if anybody would like to become a channel member or a channel supporter, you can do so by clicking that little join button down here, right just below the microphone. And for as little as 13 cents a day, you can actually help support the channel by becoming a channel member. So by all means, click on that button, get some more details. Upcoming shows. We have got next week, we will be joined by a panel of individuals like we have the last 2 seasons, and we'll be talking about everything you need to know about winter camping. This one's going to be a little more interactive, where we're going to take a lot more questions from you, the viewers, so that we can answer the questions that you really have, rather than us going on about something that that you might already know. Let's answer some questions that you might be looking for as far as gear, technique, how to stay warm, hot tanning, all these different things. So be sure to join in next week if you want to learn a little bit more about winter camping. And also, if you'd like to find out more information on Canoehound's Outdoor Adventure Show, you can follow us on Facebook at Canoehound's Outdoor Adventure Show. And we post things on there and upcoming shows, events, listings, and things like that. So by all means, please do tune into that and hit the like button. Follow us. Drop me a message. I always like that stuff. And you know what? Last week, for the first time, our streaming software here has introduced a new thing, which is something that I've been after for a long time. And it's the ability to have yourself sort of an executive producer in the shadows to do different things like posting comments and questions and things of that sort. And a good friend of mine from a YouTube channel called Raspberry Rock, his name is Russell. I'm going to get him up on screen here for a second. Russell, how you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you, Dennis?
Good. So Russell's going to keep an eye on the chat tonight and everything like that. He's going to post some of your questions and some of your comments. He's from the YouTube channel Raspberry Rock. If you're not already familiar with it, go over and check it out. But by all means, Russell did a great job last week, and he's going to shake off some of the rusties here and maybe do a little bit more. What do you think, Russell?
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good. It essentially means I
And
sit in the
other
green
thing,
room
a
and
lot of you know of all the internet woes I've been having of late. If I happen to disappear off screen, Russell's going to pop up, and he's going to be my my Vince McMahon tonight. So that's Vince
I'll
McMahon.
have questions
right?
ready.
Ed McMahon.
Yep.
Is that
Okay.
Ed McMahon from the Carson Show? Showing my age? Don't know. Too
Probably.
old for you.
I don't know.
Anyways, okay. So Russell will have a great night. And hey, Denise, how you doing? Thanks very much. And Russell, we'll see you in a little bit.
Yes, sir.
Alrighty, so without further ado, if anybody does have any questions, as I mentioned, feel free to post it over there in the chat. Put the word question before your question so that Russell can see it, and we'll do our darndest to get it up on screen. Be a great way to do a bit of segue into the next question with tonight's guest. And you know what? If you don't put your question there, you'll have the opportunity after the swag giveaway tonight to join us on panel. Come on up and ask our guest a question. You know what? It's always a lot of fun to do it that way, and you'll be sure to get your question answered and get to meet somebody that's pretty damn awesome right at the same time. Anyways, without further ado, I'm going to introduce tonight's guest. I'm going to play a little bit of a trailer, and then we'll bring him up on screen. Tonight's guest is the Westaway Explorer-in-Residence at the Royal Canadian Geographical Society, and best known for his long solo canoe journeys, including crossing nearly 4,000 kilometers of Canada's Arctic alone. His best-selling books include Alone Against the North, A History of Canada in 10 Maps, Beyond the Trees, and his newest, The Whisper on the Night Wind. Great read. This is, for any of you that haven't got this already, check out the top of the chat there. You have an opportunity to pick one of these books up. Let's throw a little trailer up here. Wow, what a stunning trailer to the book. And you know what? If you've read the book, or if you haven't read the book, that is the book right there. Please welcome to the live stream tonight. Let me just shut off my the stream. There we go. Please welcome to the live stream tonight, Adam Shoalts. Adam, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm very well. How are you, Dennis?
Good. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. You know, this is a thrill for me. You're actually somebody who lives very close, in a very close vicinity to where I live. And you're always a person that I was hoping that I'd run into one day at the grocery store or at Tim Hortons or, you know, what have you, right? But here we are meeting virtually on the show, and it's great to have you on board.
Well, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so you've been a very busy boy over the last bunch of years, with all your explorations, 4,000 kilometers across the Canadian Arctic, and there we go. Swifty Paddler says it all. You put an E in epic. You're taking on some great projects. You've got four. You're on your fourth book now, and I must say this most recent book, The Whisper on the Night Wind, is a fantastic read. What can you tell us about it?
Well, that is my new book, as you said, and it's a little bit different than any of the other books I've written. It's, again, a wilderness adventure story, but this one is a bit of a mystery with the twist put in there. So it began quite a bit differently than any of my other adventure books. This one didn't start off in the wilderness, in the forest, or in the mountains. It began when I was at home in my house. One late evening, I was burning the midnight oil, and I was doing some research, and I happened to read the diary of a fur trapper, a guy by the name of Merrick, which dated back to Labrador 100 years ago. And I often do this kind of research. I mean, I'm always poring over historical records to form the basis for my own expeditions today. And for the most part, Merrick's diary was pretty ordinary stuff. I mean, it told tales of trapping beavers and chopping firewood and hunting caribou. But then there was one entry in the diary that was just so utterly strange and bizarre. It immediately sent a chill down my spine, and it made me sit up in my chair because I'd never read anything like it. Merrick talked about finding strange tracks in the woods that no one could identify, not even trappers who spent their lifetime in the forest. And not only the strange tracks, but children reported seeing a large unknown animal that apparently stalked them. And maybe most alarmingly of all, in the night, sled dogs would go missing. So this was a real enigma. And Merrick was at a loss to explain it. And then, I thought, well, maybe he just made this all up. It was 100 years ago in a very remote place, but my curiosity led me to do a little more digging, a little more research. And I ended up, to my astonishment, finding multiple eyewitness accounts describing the same baffling circumstances, all happening in the same area of Labrador from 100 years ago. And that is where the book picks up the story, because I did an expedition to Labrador to try to investigate this legend. And I was hoping, I became convinced throughout the research that there really was something that emerged from the forest there to terrify these isolated fur trappers and lumberjacks 100 years ago, something quite real. And the book is all about investigating that mystery. And it's sort of a mystery, like a Sherlock Holmes story, where you're trying to figure it out, a game of Clue, a whodunit. But I think in the end, there is an explanation to this mystery.
Yeah, and hey, great ending to the book too. And like I say, we're not going to reveal any of this because people have to buy a copy to get the answers. And anybody that's in the chat over there, no spoilers tonight, okay? No spoilers. You don't want to ruin it for anybody that might be an avid reader and a fan of Adam's work for sure. So when exactly did this trip take place? Was it like, wasn't obviously this past summer because you had to have time to write the book and everything else? When?
Yeah, so it was last year, 2020,
okay.
Which in book terms is pretty recent, because typically it takes about a year at least to get a book turned around and put out in stores. So it was just last fall, 2020, when it actually happened, my expedition. The history behind it, that happened almost 100 years ago.
Right. Now within this book, you've encompassed a few things. You've got obviously your exploration or your adventure portion of the trip. You've encompassed the folklore of the book, or the incidences that you were exploring, and then of course you threw in a lot of history into this book, but you threw it in there sort of in layman's terms that anybody can pick up on it, even those who might not be historians, to say, right? Was that how it was planned?
Absolutely. I mean, when I write a book, I try to make it, my goal going into any book is to make it appeal to anyone, even people who don't normally read books. I want to get them excited and have a good time and get sort of wrapped up in the story. So this is an incredible adventure story, not my personal one, but the history of Labrador and this mystery, this legend. I mean, doing the expeditions that I've done, and probably, you, Dennis, can relate to this. I'd encountered my fair share of campfire stories and legends of things that go bump in the night, Bigfoot and Sasquatch and Wendigos and all that kind of stuff. But this is very different what happened in Labrador 100 years ago. I mean, the accounts were detailed, and they were made not only by fur trappers and lumberjacks, but also medical doctors and even a wildlife biologist. So there is such a rich history here that I wanted to write it in a way that would appeal to anyone. I mean, absolutely avid canoeists and outdoors people, but also, people who would never go camping. I was hoping to write the book in a way that would appeal to them. And the book isn't very old. It's only been out for a month, so maybe it's still too early to tell, but it won't be in vain if there's at least one reader out there who gets a good fright and chuckle out of the book, because I've tried to mingle the suspense with a little bit of humor in there as well.
Yeah. And you know what? The funniest part is in the green room, I was actually mentioning to you that I was in Naganash like just over a month ago, and I really wish I had a copy of this there to sit and read while I was in my hammock, when it was raining out and stuff, because during the evening we had wolves just across the bay howling, and they were like yipping and howling like crazy. We had the owls that would keep us awake at night, and of course the beaver slapping their tails, right? And there were a lot of things in the night with the wind and everything too, that would have really probably put a shiver through me. And now I'm not afraid of the dark, and I'm not afraid when I'm in the bush, but I bet you I'd have probably had a few uneasy moments reading this book if I had been up there, right? Because I was just thinking about it here reading it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the perfect book for your next camping trip to read around a campfire. It's very atmospheric in that sense, but it's also the perfect book to read over the winter, because it will whet your appetite and get you super excited and eager for the spring, when the ice melts, to get back out there in your canoes and go on your adventures. So yeah, hopefully the book will appeal to people in all 4 seasons.
So in all reality, with writing this book and going up there and exploring and doing a little bit of investigative work, was your appetite quenched with the conclusion that you had drawn for this book? Or do you feel there might be a little bit more?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer. I mean, I think I was convinced. I mean, I was like, what was going on here? Multiple eyewitness accounts, sled dogs that went missing, strange, completely bizarre tracks. They were described as 12 inches long, narrow at the heel, and forking at the front into only 2 toes. A creature with a white blaze across the top of its head that was said to stand 7 feet tall. And again, the accounts are just so detailed. I mean, I was expecting someone at the scene 100 years ago to be skeptical and say, maybe one of the medical doctors would say, this is a classic case of mass paranoia or delusion, right? These people are so isolated, and the lives they live are so full of hardship and danger in the backwoods of Labrador that they've hallucinated this. But no, none of them, not even the medical doctors or the wildlife biologists, thought that this was purely the case of a hallucination or a delusion. And neither did any of them think it was a hoax. They really believed some creature, some large unknown animal had stalked the forest around Labrador. And I'm naturally a skeptic. I always take these kind of campfire legends with a very big grain of salt. But as I was doing the research, I don't know, there was something about the details in the accounts that I couldn't get out of my mind. It like seared it into my brain. And I became convinced that something real, something tangible really did emerge from the forest there. And in the end of the book, I tried to arrive at what that was. And I think there is a logical explanation at the heart of the mystery. But in the end, can I say for 100% that I'm correct in my theory or my hypothesis? No, I can't. As you'll see, run the story, there is a bit of a twist there that I could never have imagined and never anticipated.
Yeah, it's funny. I was also telling you in the green room that I was reading the book, and I got to one of our local outfitting stores in St. Catharines, and I was talking to one of the fellows that works there, who's kind of, I guess you know him well as well, right? Mike, and we're just chatting, and we got to talking about you being on the show and about the book and stuff like that. And I told him I was going through it, and he goes, "Oh, how'd you like the ending?" I was like, "Don't say nothing," because you know what? Don't read the book backwards, people, because you'll be taking that mystery out of it. But yeah, by all means, it's a great ending, and it does leave you thinking for sure. Yeah. So now with this whole adventure, I know you tend to do your exploration solo for the most part, except for maybe the time that your buddy left you and you carried on. That was your 4,000 kilometer trek, was it not?
No, not the 4,000 kilometer one. That one was a solo one from start to finish. The one you're referring to happened 10 years ago now. That was the first time I did an expedition for the Royal Canadian Geographical Society. So I felt like there was a lot riding on it because my future career at the Royal Canadian Geographical Society was very much at stake. And my friend on that expedition, who was sort of a last minute replacement. So in his defense, it's not like he really wanted to do this. He filled in for someone else who had to pull out. He quit on that expedition halfway through. He said, you know what? He had a bit of an epiphany. A light bulb went on over his head. And he said, this whole exploring thing, it's more fun to actually look back upon than actually experience in the moment with the cold and the hypothermia and the black flies and the polar bears. So he quit halfway through that expedition, and I ended up finishing it on my own. But I mean, I actually do expeditions, a mix of both. I know I'm most people know me as a solo guy, but I do expeditions with other people, partners. I have a few different ones that I rely upon. I just came back from the Mattawa River yesterday with a friend of mine, Travis, and we've done 3 or 4 expeditions together at this point. And I have a few other friends I like to do them with as well. But I like the solitude of solo expediditions as well. So I kind of mix it up.
I'm local, and if you ever need a partner, man, let me know. I do the deep wood stuff too, so I'm not afraid of it.
I'll just add you to my list of emergency partners. I tend
to
give
there you go.
Very short notice, like, hey, 48 hours. You want to get on a plane to Nineveh?
You never know. Kids are moved out now, so I always have that opportunity. Yeah. Anyway, so but you on this particular adventure up there to Labrador, you actually recruited an old time buddy. To bring up with you on this trip, and that was on short notice as well. Was there a reason that you needed an extra set of legs on that, or?
Yeah, for this expedition that I talk about in my book, The Whisper on the Night Wind, I decided not to go solo. I just finished a solo expedition up in the Hudson Bay Lowlands. I'd been alone in the Hudson Bay Lowlands for the past month on an expedition for the Royal Canadian Geographical Society, and I just came back from that. So it was already almost the end of August, and I realized that if I'm going to pull off a trip to Labrador before winter hits, I've got a very narrow time frame to do this. And I figured having a partner is not such a bad idea. In the first case, I need an extra person in the canoe to paddle where I have to get to, because I'm going to have to paddle up river, and it's going to be really hard, strenuous paddling because I'm going up a mountain river. So having a second guy in the canoe will definitely be a major asset. As well, I'm going to have to canoe on some pretty large bodies of water on the North Atlantic, salt water, tides, big waves. So I figured having a second person would be an advantage for that kind of canoeing. But most importantly of all, I wanted a second person because of the mystery. It was pretty spooky stuff. We were going to go look for the ruins of a ghost town that was supposedly haunted by some kind of monster 100 years ago. And I figured in that kind of circumstance, it'd be pretty easy for anyone's mind to start to play tricks on them. 2 heads are better than 1. So having someone else out there with me, 2 sets of eyes, that'll be an advantage if we're looking for artifacts or clues or anything like that. Just having 2 heads to sort of apply our minds to the mystery and try to solve it, I thought would be a real asset. And it was. So I'm glad that he came with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and judging by the trailer that I played at the top of the interview here, that's actual all footage from this adventure, from this exploration trip, right?
Yep,
so,
that's all from my GoPro.
Yeah, so there you go. Like you could see the waters that you're going through. There's even a really cool shot there of the ruins at Traverse Pine as well, right? The 2-story wooden building. Yeah.
Yep, that's Traverse Pine in the trailer, and we ended up finding it, and we spent a night there. Which was a little bit spooky because that's where all those eyewitness accounts had happened 100 years ago.
Now, what exactly was that building? Was that a trapper's outpost, or was that actually like a home, a settlement?
It was both. So like a lot of buildings in Labrador, it served multiple purposes. It was both a residence that actually belonged to the Michelin family, who ran the fur trade post there, and it doubled as a fur trade post. The settlement had begun as a Hudson's Bay Company fur trade post, just like a lot of settlements all across Canada. The Hudson's Bay had founded it in the 1840s, but they found that the location was just so remote and so far off the beaten track that hardly anyone ever showed up there with any furs to trade. So they ended up privatizing it. Back in the late 1800s, they said this place isn't profitable, and the Hudson's Bay Company closed up shop. And it just sort of devolved onto the local French-Canadian fur trappers, and they continued to operate it as an independent fur trade post into the 20th century, when basically the fur trade was no longer profitable, and then the whole place was abandoned.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's crazy. And the place was, like, remarkably, for being abandoned for 100 years, looked like it was still in pretty good shape, considering.
Yeah, from the
right?
outside, it didn't look too bad, but it was kind of like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and there wasn't much
Yeah.
left on the inside.
Yeah, because like I've been to Algonquin Park and you see stuff from 100 years ago there, and all it is, it's just trees growing through it, and it's all rotted wood, right? That there still seem to have some structure, which probably added a little bit of the eeriness to it when you're camped right there.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. I mean, it's one thing to read those accounts when you're at home inside a house with electricity and 4 walls around you, but I think it's a quite different experience to reread those firsthand accounts, knowing that they were made by people who spent their lifetime in the wilderness, fur trappers and lumberjacks, in the actual setting when you're in your little tent, huddled in a sleeping bag with like the beam of a flashlight, reading these accounts in the wilderness. I mean, it's hard. I think it would be lying if I said that when I heard a branch snap or the bushes rustle, that I didn't think, what is that out there? Especially you shine your light out and you can see some hint of movement. Like I remember it looked like something almost moved in the ruins of the house, but in the dark and in the the fog, I couldn't be sure. Maybe it was just my imagination, maybe it was just some willows moving in the wind. I can't say, but definitely the effect of reading it in a place like that is different than reading it at home.
Yeah, your mind starts playing with you, right? It's yeah, that's crazy. So were there any accounts or anything that might have happened on this trip that wasn't accounted for in the book that you wish maybe you had have added, or something that well, yeah, let's just leave it at that, because everything that's in the book needs to be in the book. But was there anything that did happen that you might have not added to the book that you could share with us?
I tried to make my book as comprehensive as possible, so I didn't omit anything. Whatever happened in the expedition and in my research is in the book, including a very unexpected thing that did happen, which I don't want to give away because it'll spoil the book, because I've really written the book like a game of Clue, a whodunit, a Sherlock Holmes story, with the mystery built in there. But I can tell you that I tried to make the book as detailed and as accurate as possible, so I relied on my GoPro footage when I was writing the book. I played it all through, all the footage we recorded, and I made sort of meticulous notes to describe everything as accurately as possible. The age of the balsam fir and the black spruce and the willows and the animals we saw, the birds in the morning, the temperatures. And then I had my diaries. I kept a detailed diary inside my tent each night describing everything we encountered throughout the day. And then my partner on the expedition, my friend Zach, he was nice enough to actually give me his diary from the expedition so I could incorporate his thoughts and feelings and what he was experiencing in this very remote place as we went up into the mountains there. And that's all in the book as well. So yeah, I pretty much put everything that I had to say about that case in the book. And there's certainly other thoughts I have that I didn't put down on paper. But as far as this mystery goes, I think it's all there.
Yeah. Now you did a lot of research while you were up there at nighttime when most people would, turn in for the night. You like jumped into your tent and started working on your, doing more research and reading and stuff like that. Do the wheels ever stop turning when when you're out there on an adventure like this?
Well, this was an adventure unlike any I'd ever embarked upon. It wasn't the longest one I'd ever done, but it was in some ways the most difficult. The terrain was extremely difficult. There was no trails or paths of any kind. The forest there was almost impenetrably thick, like alder bushes and willows, impossible to see more than 3 or 4 feet in any direction. I wore the same clothes that I wore on my journey alone across the Arctic, which survived 4,000 kilometers, no problem. And within like 2 days, I was reduced to wearing rags because they were ripped to shreds on all the deadfall, just like a phenomenal amount of deadfall. I'd never seen so much deadfall. Black spruce toppled over every which way, creating barricades, and their branches are snapped off with just sharp little protruding edges, and that would constantly snag on my clothing and my pants and rip it all to shreds. So it was a difficult expedition, but I felt like I have to give it 110%. And I brought with me, as you alluded to, all of the firsthand accounts. I photocopied everything I could pertaining to early Labrador, even things that weren't directly relevant or didn't seem at the time to be directly relevant, I took with me. I photocopied them front and back to minimize space, and I had a massive stack of them, and I carried them inside my backpack and put them in a waterproof case because I wanted to reread them, sentence by sentence in my tent and on the scene in case there were any clues that I might have overlooked that might jump out at me out there. So this was like, a cold case, a mystery from 100 years ago. And this was the evidence. This was the eyewitness testimony. So I figured I got to bring this here and really focus on the descriptions of the tracks, the sightings, the noises, all the behavior, everything. And even things that don't seem immediately relevant. Maybe I'll have a eureka moment out there in the mountains. Maybe something will dawn on me that I didn't see at home. So that's why I brought all that, so I could study it in the actual place where all this had happened.
Sure. And was it kind of unique feeling to actually, like, when you were at the Traversman building, the structure there, and you're actually reading about it and you're actually there? Did that add any sense of like eeriness to yourself? Because just to stay without giving anything away, I know at times you and Zach were feeling quite spooked as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was definitely a spooky aspect to the whole place. I mean, where we ended up is one of the oldest mountain ranges on planet Earth. They're called the Mealy Mountains, and they're almost 1 billion years old. I mean, that's all ancient, almost beyond human conception. I mean, compared to the Rockies, they were already eons old when the Rockies were just being formed. And there are like mountain valleys back there that look as if, it's a wilderness that's never seen a human footprint. The land time forgot. And it's pretty easy in a place like that to think, maybe there is a Sasquatch for all we know. I mean, back here in my house, I'm always a skeptic. Like, nah, that's impossible. Never could be the case. But out there, you can almost feel it. You almost see it. So yeah, there's definitely that aspect to it all.
Yeah. Now with that, like, let's just play the devil's advocate a bit. Yeah, you always hear of people that speak of the Bigfoots and the Sasquatches and the Loch Ness monster, and so many people who look at them as like look at them very skeptically and saying like, "Are you crazy?" Right? And in this case, did you ever have that fear that maybe people might think that about what you're investigating, even though these are actually true documented accounts for what you went to explore?
No, I didn't let any worry about anyone else's what they might think if they think I'm a kook or crazy worry me at all. I mean, this was something that I found utterly fascinating, and regardless of what anyone else thinks, I was determined that I would go and investigate it, because I think, this kind of folklore and legend and mystery, to me, this is half of the fascination and the enjoyment of Canada's wilderness, the legends that are out there. So I just didn't really worry about what anyone else might think. I had made up my mind that this was a story worth taking seriously and worth investigating. And I would hope that some of those really arch skeptics who might be like, "Oh, this is all hokum and what a kook," if they read my book with an open mind, I'm hoping that by the end of it, they might feel differently about it.
Now, there was a question here that Russell just pointed out to me in the chat, and I'm just going to read it from he put it in my my little private chat there. Sarah was asking, where does Adam find his research material? Where do you find your special archives for the stuff that you're researching?
Well, that's a good question, and I actually did a PhD at McMaster University on early Canadian history, specializing in the fur trade and exploration accounts and the influence that Indigenous people had on them in Canada's subarctic and west coast. So that took almost 7 years to complete. And by the end of that, I had a very good handle on Canada's archives and the fur trade and the exploration diaries that exist. I'd spent a lot of time, reading through these accounts that have never been published, that haven't seen the light of day in 200 years, and they're just collecting dust. But specifically to answer your question in practical terms, there's a few really important archives that have these deposits of old records. The first and foremost, I should say, the Hudson's Bay Company archive is in Winnipeg, and they have all of the records of the Hudson's Bay Company going back to the late 1600s. So this is a real wealth of information for anyone who's interested in Canada's wilderness and historic fur trade routes. They have literally thousands of records from all the different fur traders and anyone who ran a fur trade post from the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, early 1900s, including some pretty big names in the history of the Hudson's Bay Company, people like Samuel Hearn and David Thompson. They have materials in there. So that's one of the big ones that's in Winnipeg. And a lot of this stuff has never been digitized. So the only way to get it is to actually go there or pay someone to go there and make photocopies for you if you're not physically going to go there. Then another really important archive is in Ottawa. That's the National Archive, which is run by the federal government. And it has, again, a whole multitude of sources on early Canadian history. A lot of really important exploration accounts are there from both the early French explorers and British explorers and other ones. There are other records there as well. The Northwest Mounted Police records are there. I was using those to do a different expedition up in the Northwest Territories looking for a lost explorer who vanished 100 years ago, going through those records. And then there's some other ones scattered in smaller archives. The provincial archives of all the different provinces in Ontario, that's in Toronto. They have over 100 notebooks kept by David Thompson there. I just did an expedition based on some of his notebooks, retracing his route over the Athabasca Pass. And then there's a bunch that are scattered in private collections. The University of Toronto and different universities have some. Some of the churches also have really important records. The Anglican Church has records from some of their missionaries and things, so that's another valuable source. And then there are other ones just scattered in random archives. Sometimes they're in the U.S. Just a few months ago, an exploration diary I was interested in was in an archive in the U.S., and I emailed the archivist and told her what my research interests were, and I mean, many of them are very happy. They're just like, they're just sort of, happy anyone is interested in it. So she would make a photocopy of all of the stuff for me because I couldn't travel there because of COVID, and send it to me. So they're kind of all over the place, but those are the main ones that I just listed.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's amazing. I never would have thought that there was so many resources. Now, great question, by the way, Sarah. Thank you very much. So for this particular exploration and investigation, did you actually find much material on it? I know you allude to quite a bit of it in the book, but was there actually quite a bit that you did find?
Well, it's all relative. So in relative terms, I would say I found a lot, far more than in any other mystery of this kind, any sort of cryptozoology or legend of this nature. I mean, I've come across plenty of, spooky stories of unexplained sightings or strange tracks in the woods in other explorers' diaries. David Thompson, for example, has a fabulous one from the winter of 1811 when he was cutting through the Rocky Mountains, and they come across these strange tracks that terrify his voyageurs out of their wits. They think it's the tracks of a mammoth. But in his case, that's it, right? That's the only witness account we have, and there's no others. And it was 200 years ago, and there was no one else who was even literate for 100 miles around him. So we just have Thompson's word, and we have to take it at face value or be skeptical of it because we can't compare it to anything else. And that's the case with a great many of these sightings and legends and folklore and things. They were made long ago in isolated places, far from any other literate observer. So there's no possibility of cross-referencing them. They're essentially a dead end as far as clues go. But what, led me to do this expedition and end up writing the book in Labrador's case is that there were actually multiple eyewitness accounts, almost half a dozen different ones. So I had multiple vantage points, and I could compare the different statements and see, where did they overlap and maybe where did they start to diverge? Did all these details agree, or is there some embellishment going on here? Is there a case of somebody's not remembering something as accurately? But because there was those multiple points of view, it was really a unique case, unlike anything I'd ever seen before. But that was partly why I was also convinced that there was something tangible, something real happening there. And what basically just made it so utterly fascinating and how I became hooked on this mystery.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And the accounts that you had, or the history that you did find on this, you're like between 1909 and 1946. Is that about the gap that you...
That is very impressive. Yes.
Yeah. I told you I read it.
Yeah. No, but you're very precise. Yeah. So even I can't be 100% precise on the dates because there is an aspect of, oral history when they were actually, when it actually happened and then when they were written down, which was at a subsequent date. Now, the earliest one I could find dated from 1909 when it was written down, but it was clear from the account that it had happened at some earlier time. How much earlier, it's impossible to say. Not a whole lot earlier, but sometime before 1909. And this is where some of the accounts start to diverge. Some of them are very specific. They say that this thing, or things, plural, whatever it was there for 2 winters, that it only lasted 2 winters, and then the sighting stopped. But some of the other accounts diverge from that and say, no, like the last one was as late as, the end of the 1930s or even 1940. But the last written account was from the mid-1940s, as you said. And then after that, there's no more.
Mm-hmm. Wow, amazing. Now, Question about the adversity that you went through on this trip. You faced big raging rivers. You faced the thickets of the landscape with the forest, right? You faced some like really steep mountainous terrain. How did all that lend into the whole mystery as well? I know Labrador is a very untapped resource, and like there's a lot of mystery shrouded around Labrador. But how did that landscape like lend into this entire mystery?
Yeah, I mean, Labrador is a land that seems almost tailor-made for a good mystery. I mean, it's so vast, almost 300 square kilometers. And the population density of Labrador, even today in the year 2021, is a minuscule 0.092 people per square kilometer. I mean, it's very hard to wrap your head around that figure. It is one of the only places in our world where you could still wander for months and not come across, a single pop can or a cigarette butt or a road or a town or even another living soul. So it's a pretty special place, and it seems almost perfect. The perfect setting for this kind of mystery. I mean, the landscape itself is very impressive. I mean, it is a land of windswept mountains, fjords, glaciers, and ancient primeval forest. I mean, there's black spruce and balsam fir there that's centuries old. So it really is a special landscape. And the landscape itself, I don't know. I mean, I've wandered all over Canada. I've done expeditions in all 10 provinces and 3 territories. But there's something about Labrador. I like to use the term enchanting or bewitching. The mountains there, I mean, just the special history it has. You think of the tales of the Vikings and some of the oral history of that place. It seems to lend itself to legends, just the landscape. I mean, this ancient land is what it feels like, but so remote and so special.
Sure. Yeah. Now there's other YouTubers, and because we're on a YouTube platform here right now, there's other YouTubers that have over the past couple of years embarked on different journeys across Labrador. Jim Baird is one. You're probably familiar with Jim Baird. The Northern Scavengers did quite the expedition. Are you familiar with the areas that they've visited and I guess explored? Because I believe even some of their work was done through the Canadian or the Royal Canadian Geographical Society as well, or at least sponsored in part.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know I've seen a little bit of their stuff, but not in depth. For this case, this was a little bit different than my normal expedition. Like when I was doing my journey alone across the Arctic, I was very much trying to get in touch with anyone who'd done any recent expeditions, just to get their thoughts on gear and routes and that kind of stuff. And if I do another expedition in Labrador, that for sure would be on the top of my mind. But this one was so different in that I was really facing the other direction. I was looking to the far past and trying to unearth anything I could from 100 years ago or even earlier. I actually dug as deep into the record of Labrador as I could, back into the 1700s, the 1600s. And I even went back and read all of the Norse accounts that have survived from Iceland of the Vikings. And I did all the indigenous oral history as well from the Inuit. So everything was leading me far back in time, because ultimately what I was trying to figure out were these accounts of what had happened a century ago rather than anything in the 21st century.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Now this entire adventure that you're like, I'm talking post trip, you're here now. Now you're promoting the book itself. You're on a real whirlwind of a tour. I seen that Russell had posted that if anybody's looking for your schedule as far as your public speaking about the book and your book tour, that you're pretty enthralled in that right now. It's got you really hopping and moving around from town to town, doesn't it?
Yep. Well, I don't have a day job. This is all I do. 90% of my income comes from book sales.
Yep.
So you have to do what you can to get the word out there on your book. And that's why I'm grateful for you, Dennis, for having me on your show.
It's an honor.
When people buy my books, they're supporting me and making it possible for me to do more expeditions and write more books, because I love reading and writing, but if I can't do it if I'm not able to earn some kind of living from it. So that's part of it. It comes with the territory of writing a book is doing these kind of interviews. And I'm doing a little bit of in-person speaking events, not as much as I would have liked, but because of COVID, they're kind of more limited, but I do have a few still coming up. I'm going to be in Sudbury, New Liskeard, and London in the next couple of weeks.
There you go. Anybody that in the chat that's from those areas, look it up on his website there to find out when you can get out to see Adam. For anybody that is interested in picking up Adam's book, as he mentioned there, this is how he makes his living. Right at the top of the chat over there, you'll see there's like a blue box. There's a link in there so that you can pick up a copy of The Whisper on the Night Wind. And also he has 3 other books that are available out there, and I have links to them in the description below as well. So if anybody's looking for any interesting reads, I know the History of Canada in 10 Maps, I'm told I haven't read that one yet, but I'm told it's a very good read. Beyond the Trees I have a copy of, and what was the other one?
Alone Against the North. That's my
Alone Against the North, yes. So if anybody's looking for copies of them books, by all means, the links are down there in the description. Support somebody who's doing some great research and some great exploration. Keep it up. I mentioned to you that I myself, and self-admittedly, I'm not much of a reader. I think I suffer a bit from ADD, and I have a hard time focusing on one thing for any long period of time, which includes reading. And this book had me captivated and mesmerized, and I read it pretty much in 5 sittings. And I plan on reading it again, as I told Adam, so that I could pick up on the things I didn't pick up on when the dog was barking or the doorbell rang or something, right? So very, very worthy of a read, everybody. Check it out. You've been of late, Adam, you mentioned that you just got back from a trip up in Mattawa. I see Josie from Adventures with Josie was asking, was your recent trip down to Mattawa River, is that for any research, or was that just Adam getting out for a trip?
It was a bit of both.
Yeah.
I'm always just getting out because I love being in the wilderness, and I'm out in the forest every chance I get. But I'm also, the Mattawa is one of the most historic rivers in Canada. It's just absolutely loaded with history. People like Champlain went down that river, and I'd written about the Mattawa in my book, A History of Canada in 10 Maps. And I'd been rereading some of the accounts from the 1700s, fur traders like Alexander Henry on the river. So I actually wanted to go there with those diaries, much like I did in Labrador, and just compare some of the landscape to what they had described back in the 1700s, early 1800s. Probably not for the purpose of the book. I don't even know if I'm ever going to actually publish or write anything about it. But this is just sort of the sort of thing I do whenever I get the chance, this kind of research, because I find it so utterly fascinating. And many of the, often is the case, I can't predict where this stuff will lead. It just sort of the way these references work is I can read something in someone's diary, and then it leads me down some rabbit hole to another reference and to another. And I end up in a place I never dreamed of. So it was more in that sort of vein that I was doing that trip.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. I paddled the Mattawa myself, and it is a really nice river. And it ends at one of my favorite provincial parks, the family camp at, and that's Samuel D. Well, it doesn't end there, but it does kind of end there. No. Anyways, with Samuel D. Champlain, one of my favorite provincial parks to go with the family, at least when the kids are small, right? So.
Yeah, it's an absolutely beautiful river, so full of history, and I love that area. It's just a fascinating place.
That's cool. So back to the book here a bit more. When I was reading the book, and I got towards the end, and I noticed that this is kind of going to allude back to when I asked you if there are any other events that may have happened that you didn't allude to in the book. You went from kind of drawing your conclusion, and then your trip out. The chapters for your trip out were fairly short. Was there nothing really eventful that happened on the way out, or you just wanted to leave the mystery being solved as where it was, right?
Yeah, that's a question. So that's starting to get into the literary presentation of the trip, which is, well, one, I didn't want to make it repetitive, so we had to retrace our route back because we didn't have a bush pilot or anything. We parked our car on the banks of the Churchill River, and at the end of the expedition, we had to get back there. So I didn't want to re-describe in the book what I'd already been through, so we just sort of breezed through all of that pretty quickly. But also, as you can see, when we came out of those mountains, after going through everything and experiencing everything we did, we felt pretty confident that we'd actually solved the mystery. We thought we'd found and figured out what this whole thing was. So we were sort of just breezing out of there like, the spell is broken. Because for a while we started to doubt. It was like we were under the spell of those mountains. And we were both starting to think like, wow, it's one thing to say back in our living rooms that this couldn't possibly exist, but out here, it's a whole different world. So for a while, we were really, really looking around us, and it was pretty spooky and eerie. I mean, sometimes our stuff would seem to move around the camp or vanish. I put a bug net down, and then the next second it was gone. My friend Zach, his knife disappeared from his belt. And up in those mountains, we remembered some of the legends told about them and the strange things that happened there. And it was definitely pretty eerie. But by the time we got out of the mountains, we were like, I think we've unraveled it. We were feeling very confident. So that's partly why the return journey is much faster. It's like, okay, and then we just get back. Yeah.
Now, I asked you when you went up. How long was this whole journey? Was it 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
2 weeks, yeah. So it was a pretty short trip by my standards. I'm used to doing expeditions anywhere from a month to 4 months. I'm planning a 4-month solo journey right now for the spring. But those 2 weeks, did they ever pack a lot of punch? They were very, very difficult, both physically and mentally. It started off very cold weather, and it was September, so I'd actually told my friend Zach, he hadn't done an expedition with me before, and he said, I think I can handle it. He's got a background in mixed martial arts. He's actually a professional mixed martial arts fighter. But he said the one thing that was kind of a concern for him were the bugs. And he said, the black flies and mosquitoes. And I had actually told him, don't worry, you've got nothing to worry about. It's September. It's in the mountains of Labrador. It'll be far too cold for any bugs. And that's the way it was for the first week when it was icy and there was frost. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the temperature warmed up and like clouds, like black magic, just millions of black flies materialized. And I told him, you won't need a bug net or, bug spray. Being eaten alive, poor guy in these thickets. And me being me, I never leave home without a bug net. I always have one in my pocket. So I put mine on, and I felt kind of guilty about that. But, fortunately, he's still my friend. So I think he's forgiven me.
Yeah, you know what? For what a bug net weighs, carry one, man. They're like mere half an ounce or something, right? Yeah,
even
so maybe that was karma when yours kind of went missing. That
that is true. It ended up going missing. So then I was reduced to the same circumstances.
Yeah. Funny thing today, I actually watched. I did a little bit of research on Zach himself, and I come across one of his MMA matches on YouTube that the fastest knockout in the division of MMA that he fights in. It's like, well, okay, I guess Adam must have brought him as a bodyguard, maybe a little bit of protection on the trip too, right?
Yeah, he's pretty impressive, and you'll get a little bit of you'll end up through reading this book. You won't only learn about the legend in the wilderness, you'll learn more about mixed martial arts than you ever knew before, because that was the topic of our conversations when we were doing long hours paddling. I would ask him some of the stuff that I didn't know about, how much you get paid for an MMA fight, and what are you allowed to do? Can you punch someone in the throat? Those are the kind of questions I would ask him. And he was pretty cheerful in terms of talking about all of that.
So how was driving there? It was a 3-day drive to where you went, and when you came back, how was the drive there compared to the drive back? What did you talk about on the drive in versus what you spoke about on the drive home? It's a lot of time. You sat together in a canoe for a couple of weeks. What was the drive to and fro like?
Well, we really didn't know each other that well. We'd never gone camping before together. We'd never spent any significant amount of time together. We'd gone to high school together, but we hadn't been friends. He was a year ahead of me. But I knew that he was an outdoorsy kind of guy, and I knew that he was obviously in mixed martial arts, and I knew he was tough. He grew up on a dairy farm, and he'd done a bunch of adventures and things. So we were sort of just getting to know each other on the drive there. And fortunately, the drive to Labrador is a pretty long and lonely road, and there's no cell reception, so you have a lot to talk about. Now, on the way there, I was actually, my mind was half lost in thoughts because I had all my photocopies in my lap, and I would be going through them. He did most of the driving. And I'd be going through these records, and I was actually asking him, picking his brain, do you believe in Sasquatch? Do you believe in demons? Do you believe in ghosts? What do you make of this? Do you have any theories? And he actually came up with really, I thought, a very strong hypothesis, which I sketch out in the book, which he thought might explain what was happening there, because I'd given him some of the photocopies ahead of time and said, read this over. This is where we're going, and tell me if you have any thoughts. And that's sort of what we were doing on the way in. On the way back, we were just sort of reflecting on the journey, and I think we were looking forward to getting a shower and a decent meal. So that was more of the return trip.
Yeah. You think he'll ever do another trip with you like that again?
I think he's already has. Just in September,
Oh.
Zach reunited with me, and we were out in the Rockies. We retraced David Thompson's route over the Rocky Mountains, which was all on foot, no canoeing, through the Rockies, starting in Alberta and going into BC. So, yep, that means he must still be friends with me if he's done a second expedition in the time since.
Cool. Okay, Adam, we're nearing the 8 o'clock mark, but there's a couple of questions I'd like to get in, maybe quick answer ones that, and then we'll get on with the swag giveaway. Then I'd like to invite some people on panel maybe to ask a question or two of you that obviously I've missed anyways. Steve Matho is asking, what authors are your friends and how do they help you become a better writer?
Wow, nobody's ever asked me that before. Actually, this is kind of refreshing. Normally, people just ask me expedition questions, and this is kind of ironic, Dennis. You said you weren't much of a reader, but you've done more, book questions for me than I think anyone who's ever interviewed me before. But none of my friends aren't really writers. My group of friends are the people who I grew up with, and those are the people I still do expeditions with. My friend Travis up on the Mattawa. But I like to say that, I sort of do have friends who are authors, but they're all dead. They died hundreds of years ago, but I like reading their books. And when I read their books, you kind of do feel like you get to know them a little bit. So This is going to sound really strange, but one of my favorite writers is actually Washington Irving, who wrote his books 200 years ago. He's best known for writing The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which is a great sort of Halloween read. And he also wrote the story of Rip Van Winkle, the guy who goes up the mountain, falls asleep for 20 years, and then comes back down the mountain, and everything has changed. But he was a brilliant writer, brilliant storyteller. I love his descriptive powers. He has a real gift for describing a landscape and bringing it to life. So he's one of my favorite writers, Washington Irving. But I read a huge variety, and I try to read like well outside my own genre. So I love reading wilderness books. As a kid, I was 13 years old when my teacher, Mr. Bianchini, introduced us to Farley Mowat. We read Farley Mowat's book, Lost in the Barrens, in my school. And I fell in love with that. And then I ended up reading a whole ton of Farley Mowat books and Pierre Burton. I read a bunch of his books, Peter C. Newman. But I read everything, Lucy Maud Montgomery, Anne of Green Gables. I think that's one of the greatest books ever written. I should be promoting my own book if I was a good salesman, but everyone should read Anne of Green Gables. You'd be a skeptic and be like, oh, I'm not going to like that. But her powers as a storyteller are just amazing. It's a book that will make you laugh and cry all at the same time. So I try to read as many as I can. And I guess those authors have influenced me. Should probably stop talking, because if you get me talking about books and literature, I'll go on all night. So I'll just
this is awesome.
leave it with that.
Yeah. No, this is, like I say, this is awesome. This is the kind of thing. This is why I like having fresh guests on the show. It's opens up a whole new world, right, for many. Nate Muskoka is asking, what made Adam so interested in early Canadian history?
Wow, it was partly what I just mentioned, my early schooling. Like everyone, I had grade 7 Canadian history. And I don't know why. That was with Mrs. M, but there was something about it that sparked my imagination. I remember reading a book about the War of 1812, a fictional story about this young Canadian farm boy named Jeremy Fields, who gets swept up in the war, and he becomes the Batman, which is the personal servant to General Brock. And I just remember thinking, this is fascinating because it happened right here in our own backyards. Where that Tim Hortons is or where that McDonald's is. Think what was there 200 years ago or 300 years ago. There's these incredible stories right under our noses, and we don't hear about them. And then when you do, it's like entering this whole world of imagination and fascination and mystery and adventure. So I think it was partly just, learning about the areas in our own country, like the Mattawa, that I found so fascinating. I think Canadian history is this incredible story, and I was always intrigued by it. But every time I would try to talk about Canadian history, and when I was working on my PhD, I was actually teaching Canadian history at McMaster. The students would always say, oh, Canadian history is so boring, so dull. And I'd be like, no, Canadian history is not boring, but sometimes Canadian historians can be. So I wrote the book, A History of Canada in 10 Maps, to do Canadian history differently. Take the conventional approach, throw it out the window, and turn it into a page turner, a thriller. This adventure with cliffhangers, and that would get people really excited and swept up into the drama of early Canadian history. So that's the approach I took. And I spent a lot of time studying the history of other countries. I worked actually on an archaeological dig down in Ohio and in Central America, in Sweden, learning about Vikings and Mesoamericans and Mayans and Aztecs. And I was actually a teaching assistant for ancient Greek history and ancient Rome. And I sort of like took the approach that I learned from studying all these other histories. And I thought, now, like for the first time, early Canadian history has come into focus for me. It used to be blurry or misty, but now I can see it more clearly, and I can make it a story that is going to be something that will get people captivated by it. I say it's like Game of Thrones, this big struggle for empire with larger than life characters, heroes and villains, and all sorts of drama, mutiny and plots and conspiracies and murders and, bear attacks and cannibalism. There's so much going on. So that's all in my other book, A History of Canada in 10 Maps.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know what? I want to sit around a campfire with you, Adam. I want to hear some more of these stories for sure. Okay. You know what? We've got, I'm going to take care of the swag giveaway right now. And then if you don't mind, we'll probably invite some people. Well, I've already, hope you don't mind, because I've already posted the link in the chat for that maybe have a couple people come up and ask questions. Maybe we'll get up to 4 people to pop up here.
Sounds
are
good.
You comfortable with that, Adam?
I think so. Sounds
awesome.
Good.
Okay, great. To everybody in the chat, you'll see I just posted this link in there to invite you up on panel. There's one question that I ask is because you're watching this on YouTube, most likely, when you do go into the StreamYard software, please shut off the volume on YouTube so that we do not get the feedback there. Otherwise, I'll have to drop you in the basement until you figure out what's going on. But you just have to shut off the YouTube volume and listen to the volume through StreamYard. Very simple and easy to set up. Come on up, ask one question, maybe a follow-up question, and then we'll move on to the next people. And also, when you're in the basement, rest assured I will see you down there, and I'll bring you up in order that you actually pop into the chat. With that being said, oops, there we go. I'm going to, Adam, would you like to stay on screen during the swag giveaway, or would you like to maybe refresh your beverage or make a men's room break?
No, well, whatever you normally do, I'm fine. I'm ready.
It's all good. I'll leave you on screen then. Okay. So anyways, just to let everybody know, the swag giveaways switched over to a monthly swag giveaway where each week we will be asking the question. You have until, let me just put the banner up here on screen, which is this guy. You have until the end of November to get your answer in for this question, and that'll get you a ballot into the draw at the end of the month. What are we giving away, you ask? Well, we're going to start out with a Canoehound Adventures prize pack where we've got our usual, our decals, our iron-on patches. We actually have 3 because we have a new one to the game now, which are available for sale. We'll talk about that later. We've also got, of course, the decals. We got some goodies from Algonquin Outfitters. Our good friends over at Kid Products have donated a ferro rod. We've also got a folding cutlery set and one of those little bellow tubes for blowing into a fire to get the fire rocking. I'm also, because of the generosity of all the super chats we had last week, I'm throwing in a Canoehound Adventures coffee mug. You can't have this one because it's got my cold coffee in it right now, but you will get a new one. We got Canoehound Adventures hat and a Canoehound Adventures water bottle. So we got a whole bunch of swag going out at the end of the month. You can't win if you don't have a ticket. And this week's swag giveaway question is, Adam Shoalts has 4 best-selling books. Name 2 of them. And the answers can be found in the description below with links to where you can buy them. So there you go. The answer's not going to get any easier than that. You can send your answers over to coasprize@gmail.com by the end of November here. At that time, we'll do a draw, announce it on the show, and I'll reach out to the winners. And you never know, depending between now and then, I might even add a couple more things. So by all means, get your answers in. Wow. Lots to be said there, huh? Okay, we'll leave that up on screen there for about a minute or two, and we are going to get back on to our interview here with Adam Shoalts. So, Adam, you mentioned that you have you're planning right now for another exploration. What kind of things are coming down the pipe for Adam Shoalts maybe in the next year or two?
Well, I'm planning at least 2 different winter expeditions. I was just doing that this afternoon. I figured it's high time that I actually finalize my plans because I'm supposed to be doing an expedition in December for the Royal Canadian Geographical Society as Explorer-in-Residence, and I still haven't actually finalized what I'm doing other than that it's going to be a winter expedition on snowshoes, and it will be solo. So I don't have 100% I don't have that hammered down 100%, but many of the expeditions I do are sort of multi-year projects. Like I've been doing one for the last, 5 years, all about one guy from Canadian history, this explorer who almost nobody's ever heard of. His name was Hubert Darrell, and he vanished 100 years ago. But he was so prolific. He did expeditions and journeys everywhere across northern Canada, from Hudson's Bay to Alaska. And I'm writing a book about him, trying to tell his story, because I think he's such an incredible individual. And I've been retracing some of his routes and looking for artifacts like ruins of his cabins and things. But he covered so much ground that it's taking me years to retrace it all. So I'm doing some of that, and that might be on the horizon in the near future. And then I'm going to do another solo winter expedition probably in February, again on snowshoes somewhere in northern Canada. I don't know the exact details. And then in the spring, I'm going to embark on a canoe trip once all the ice is melted. And that'll be a long journey. And this one is going to be a little bit different. It has to do with migratory birds and tracing out some bird routes. There's more to it than that, but that's about all I can say for the time being. But that journey will be another really long one. I don't know exactly how long it will take, but probably in the 3 to 4 month range.
Mm-hmm. Could that turn out to be another book?
Yeah, that remains to be seen. So I can't.
Little birdie here.
No, well, none of that. I can't predict any of that because it depends if I succeed or what happens. Right, the publisher is ultimately in charge of that, so they could be like, "That's the lamest trip we've ever heard of. Migratory birds that would never sell as a book. Go do something more dangerous." So I don't know. That ultimately isn't up to me, but I'm going to keep doing what I love first and foremost, which is adventures and exploring the wilderness.
Yeah, sure. Okay, a question I had for you here, and this may sound silly, but can you explain what Westaway Explorer-in-Residence is? What exactly is Westaway in Residence, Explorer-in-Residence?
Sure. So I've been doing expeditions for the Royal Canadian Geographical Society for over 10 years. Originally just on a one-off sort of basis where I would propose ideas and the expedition committee there would either approve them or reject them. And then after my journey alone across the Arctic in 2017, they named me one of their Explorer-in-Residence. I think I was myself and George Karunis, who's a storm chaser. He chases tornadoes and does extreme weather. We were both appointed Explorer-in-Residence at that time. We joined Jill Heinerth, who's an underwater explorer. She does cave diving. And then I was Explorer-in-Residence for a few years. And then in 2020, I became Westaway Explorer-in-Residence. Westaways being donors to the Royal Canadian Geographical Society. And just like at universities, they have like named chairs, like the Wilson Chair of Canadian History or something like that. At McMaster, they named me Westaway Explorer-in-Residence in their honor. So they support the Society's work in my expeditions as well.
Excellent. Wow. Okay. So I was wondering what that relationship was there. How does one become involved with the Royal Canadian Geographical Society? Is it something where you just write them a letter and say, "Hey, this is me, and this is what I want to do," type of deal?
Well, there's many different ways to get involved. One, you can subscribe to Canadian Geographic. That's the easiest way. And anyone who subscribes to Canadian Geographic magazine automatically becomes a member of the Royal Canadian Geographical Society. It's a non-profit, and it's been around for almost 100 years. And once you're a member of the society, you can actually vote at the annual meeting on committees and all kinds of things. And there's tens of thousands of members across Canada. And, there's many different committees within the Royal Canadian Geographical Society. A lot of the work is educational. Their mandate is actually education. So a lot of it has to do with classrooms, making maps and doing all sorts of school initiatives. I just spoke at a student conference this past summer. So that's the first step to getting involved, is actually just getting a subscription to Canadian Geographic, and then you become a member of the Royal Canadian Geographical Society. And then there are fellows, and fellows are elected once a year, and the annual fellows dinner, it's virtual this year. It's actually happening tomorrow night. So if you want to join, you can. William Shatner, he's going to be there. Just back from outer space.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of other illustrious guests who are involved in the society. Roberta Bondar is the vice president. The late Alex Trebek was the president of the Royal Canadian Geographical Society. So you can become a fellow. And as far as expeditions go, there are different expeditions within the organization, but there's a committee, and they give out grants to fund explorers. And anyone can apply. You don't even have to be a member to apply, although that would be recommended, but you don't have to be. And they will sponsor work. And just recently, I've been involved in actually setting up a new initiative to help fund young explorers, people who are just emerging in their early 20s or teens even, and just trying to get their expeditions off the ground. This is called the Trebek Initiative, and it's specifically to help young people get more into the outdoors. So that is just a very small amount of what the Royal Canadian Geographical Society does. They're actually having their fundraiser tomorrow night. It's all virtual, so you can actually buy tickets and support the organization if you want. And I'm going to be doing a special presentation as well as a whole ton of other adventurers and explorers, all happening tomorrow night.
Wow, you know what? If you can somehow get me that information, I'll post it on my Facebook page for anybody that may be willing to even support the event. We've got a bunch of generous people in the chat here that might be interested in supporting that, because in turn it helps support what you actually do as well, right?
Yeah, and they're having a silent auction as well when they're auctioning off all kinds of trips, not just in Canada, but around the world to all sorts of exotic locations and other experiences where you can go out with, some of the best artists and photographers, wildlife photographers, and spend a day doing their sort of things. In the past, I've been auctioned off trips with me, but I'm not doing that this year. I'm doing a different presentation, but all of that's happening tomorrow night. So yeah, I will send you the link for sure.
Oh, great. Yeah, and I'll get that up on Facebook. It's funny. We got nobody in the basement to ask a question. I must be doing a fantastic job if I'm getting all these questions in and everybody's happy. Come on, everybody. If anybody wants to join on panel here, by all means, we're running out of time and you want to make sure you get it in. I'm going to post the link once again in the chat if anybody would like to come on up and ask Adam a question. Canadian exploration. Have you ever thought of going beyond, or is Canada your place? Is that
Canada is pretty much my place. I mean, I would be perfectly content to spend the rest of my life in Canada, just doing expeditions here. I mean, I think Canada is the most amazing country in the world. It's so vast. I mean, Newfoundland is closer to Europe than it is to British Columbia, which is a pretty amazing statistic that really speaks to the vastness that is Canada. And I always think, even if I lived 10 lifetimes, I would never see it all. I barely scratched the surface. There's so many lakes in Canada that even today, no geographer has ever counted them. The best estimate is maybe 3 million lakes in Canada, tens of thousands of different rivers. So, there's just so much to explore here, so many mountains and things that I'm perfectly content to stay in Canada. I mean, it's not that I don't like the rest of the world. I love vicariously exploring beyond Canada's borders, reading other people's books and things. And I've done the odd trip outside of Canada, but yeah, for the most part, this is where I'm happy. This is where I love to be. So I'd be happy to just keep doing expeditions here. Excellent.
And back to your writing too. What enticed you to write your very first book? Did you have any writing background before that at all, or what enticed you to do that?
Well, I had a little bit. I'd written. I'd actually started by writing a newspaper column on environmental issues like nature and the outdoors, wildlife, conservation issues. That was my first published writing. It was all about that kind of stuff, bushcraft and nature lore and environmental issues. And then I'd written some freelance magazine pieces here and there, a little bit for Canadian Geographic, just a bit here and there. And I always loved reading. I mean, I loved reading books and I loved writing, but I didn't know if I'd ever actually publish a book. But it was actually after I'd done expeditions, I was approached by a literary agent who came to me and said, I think you should write a book. So he actually persuaded me, and I said, okay, well, sure. So that's how it actually began.
Cool. Wow. We had a couple people pop into the basin here, Adam. We're not alone. Let's start with Sarah. Sarah, you've asked a couple of questions tonight. How are you doing tonight?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we've got you loud and clear.
Okay, because I'm not good at technology, so
that's okay. I'm not either sometimes.
I guess I have kind of a two-part question, and it's related to maps. Like, first off, when I read your book about the 10 maps that I can't remember the title exactly, Canada in 10 maps. I was just wondering how much research you had to actually do to kind of condense each of those sections down into, the number of pages that you did. Because I have to say, like, especially reading the 1812 version, and I posted this in the post in the chat, but like I knew the outcome, and yet like I was still like, oh my goodness, I don't know what's going to happen here, And the other one is like through all your exploration, because I know you've gone through some remote areas. Have you found flaws in any of the maps that you have been using?
Okay, so those are two great questions. I guess I'll tackle the first one. So for my book, A History Canada 10 Maps, that took, a lot of research, literally years, but when I was doing the research, I didn't realize I was doing research for a book. I was just doing it because it was interesting to me. I was fascinated. I was studying Canadian history. I was working. My background is partly in archaeology. So I was working on archaeology digs on different sites that feature in the book. And I was getting to know those locations intimately, studying the landscape. And that's something that I tried to bring into the book, describe the topography of this site and how it influenced the history there. That one chapter, which is very different than any other chapter in the book, the War of 1812 one, I first started researching the War of 1812 in depth at that site as a 19-year-old. I had a summer job there, so I studied it intimately. And yes, I mean, it was difficult to get the book down to just 10 maps. I had sort of a running list of 20 or 30 maps that I thought would work for the book. And then I had to sort of read through all of the records, the diaries, and decide, well, which is the best of the best, because I can only have 10 in this book. The 10 most important, most fascinating maps that tell the story of early Canada. So I had to narrow it all down. And then when I did it, I actually wrote the book pretty fast, because that was immediately before I left on my journey alone across the Arctic. So it kind of compressed my schedule. But I don't know, I'm probably like a lot of people in that if my publisher said you have 2 years to write this book, I would do nothing for the first 18 months. And then the last 6 months, I would seriously write the book. So all of that information had to be compressed down into something that was exciting and a page turner. Is what I was going for. And then your second question, which was about modern maps and if I've ever found mistakes on them. Absolutely. Yes, that does happen. On my journey across the Arctic and on my other expeditions, I've definitely found errors, mistakes on topographic maps, in Ireland where it's not actually there, or, the island is different than the way it's described, or something that was drawn as a bay, like this lake goes into a dead end bay, but it's like, no, that's not a dead end. There's actually an outlet there, or this isn't a bay at all. It's just an island. So those kind of mistakes happen. They're on topographic maps. And the reason is quite simple. Most of the maps of northern Canada were made using what geographers call remote sensing, which means nobody actually went there and made the map physically and visited the place. They were done using aerial photographs, most of those aerial photographs being taken in the 1950s and the 1960s. You can actually go to the National Air Photo Library in Ottawa and look at these black and white maps, but that's how those topographic maps were made. If you look in the corner, you'll see the date on them. And it's very easy for a cartographer to make a mistake when they're looking at an air photo or even a satellite image and thinking, this is an island or this is a waterfall, and then just making a mistake when they're actually drawing it out. So mistakes exist on those maps, just human error. So yeah, that's something I've found. I don't know, Dennis, you probably found that too on some of your trips, but there's definitely mistakes out there. And of course, the geography changes. And somewhere like the Mackenzie River, the islands are changing because of the current in the river, and the ice is shifting things around. So yeah, the landscape is changing as well. So then that can change the maps. But yes, definitely. But thank you for the question.
Okay, thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you popping up on panel. I hope you're enjoying the show tonight. Next, we have Michaela from Voyager Tripper. You're getting to be a regular on the show here, girly.
Yeah, I've just been playing hooky from work more often. So I love the show.
Michaela, meet Adam.
Hey, love your books. Great to actually kind of talk to you in person. I've got two little questions for you. The first being, if some of the topics that you want to write about don't necessarily align with what your publisher wants, would you consider still writing about them, but in either like a self-published formatting or in magazines, or like get those stories out somewhere else that aren't necessarily a published book? Like, will we still get those stories?
That's something. It's funny you should ask that, because that's something I thought about, where I write sometimes just for my own amusement, where I've written other stories or other things, and then I don't do anything with them. I just keep them private, show them to my wife. And I thought, should I publish these just on my website and make them freely available to anyone, or is that a bad thing to do? And I don't know, and I haven't really done any of that yet. So I focus mostly on the books, but at some point I have to wrestle with this question and decide whether or not I want to put more content online for free or in some other medium. Very occasionally I write magazine articles when somebody asks me to, but I prefer writing books. I like sort of long form rather than short form writing. But I don't know, maybe I'll decide at some point to put some of the other content online. But I haven't done much of that yet. No. So it's a possibility, and certainly, yeah, who knows what the future holds? I can't predict. Anything is possible at this point.
Okay, that sounds good. And then my second question, I'm trying to think of a way to articulate it in a way that doesn't sound silly, but after reading Alone Against the North, that trip seems to have gone so smoothly. Is there ever a moment when you're on the trip where you're thinking like, great that everything is kind of working out the way that it should, I'm safe, things are going well, but would be great if something like dramatic would happen where there was almost like I was put in danger somehow, because that would be a really exciting read. But obviously you want to be safe. So sorry, that sounds like a silly question, but is that something you're ever wrestling with like, this would be really exciting to write about, but I also want to be safe and like keep myself alive?
Yeah, it's probably true that if I died or got eaten by a polar bear, my books would sell much better.
Who's going to write about it, though?
Yeah.
I told my wife that the other day when we were talking about life insurance. I said, my life insurance policy is if I die, my books will sell better. So that will take care of everything. If it bleeds, it leads, right? That's what they say. Actually, well, I think you said Alone Against the North, but Beyond the Trees, that's the book where I was like, man, this went so smoothly. Maybe this journey across
that one.
Yeah, maybe it'll just seem boring to everyone else. I was thinking that when I got to the end, I was like, it seemed to go remarkably smooth, this journey across the Arctic. And maybe everyone else, when they read about it, will just be like, well, this is not that interesting or not that exciting. I wanted something more dangerous or something bad to happen to him. I wanted him to break his leg or get attacked by a bear or, something bad. But no, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm writing nonfiction. So whatever happens, and that's what I write in my books. I can't simply say, oh, I'm just going to make it up and say, a bear came and, it attacked Zach and I heroically killed this bear and saved his life. So no, I mean, I think I've been pretty fortunate, but some of the expeditions I've done expeditions in the past and I was like, well, that's probably not good enough. So I'm not going to write a book about it. I've just done my report. So I do write reports for the Royal Canadian Geographical Society, but they're more dry and academic. So yeah, if it was really bad, then it probably would never get published. They would just say, no, you're setting the bar too low. Go do something more dangerous because we need more drama. We want something bad to happen. So yeah, who sells? So yeah, partly that, yes. But thank you for your questions. Very good questions.
Welcome. Thanks.
Thanks, Michaela. You know where to be after the show tonight, right?
Yep.
Awesome. We'll see you later.
Yeah.
I see we got Jack Ferguson in the basement. We'll have you up here in a moment, Jack. And there's probably room for a couple of more people if time allows. And I will get once again that link in the chat. And here it comes. There are a couple of great questions in the chat here that I wouldn't mind popping up here as well. Can you pop that one up for me, Russell? Can you see that one there? Where the heck is it here? There we go. We'll bring up Eric Poirier. He says, of all the areas in the Hudson Bay lowlands, any favorite rivers or areas you tend to go back to, or is it always new adventure and discovery expeditions?
Well, that's something I wrestle with. I mean, there's so many rivers I've been to, not just in the Hudson's Bay lowlands, but elsewhere in the Northwest Territories and the Yukon, that I think this is breathtakingly beautiful, and I'd love to come back here. And I, desperately want to get back to those places. But so far, at least, I don't seem to find the time to go back. I'm always ending up somewhere new. And I guess that's partly the thrill and the excitement, is going somewhere you haven't been before. But I hope that I still have many years ahead of me, and that as I get a little bit older, I'll be able to return to some of those places and revisit them and spend some more time there. So for the most part right now, I've gone to different places, but I hope to be able to return to some. The exception is the Irony of the Again River, which I did go back to again. So that's the one time, and that is in the Hudson's Bay lowlands, where I ended up retracing my steps. But I'm sure I'll do more of that in the future.
Any trips that you couldn't complete that you would like to complete?
Not off the top of my head, but that's partly because I have dozens of hypothetical trips in my mind.
Right.
So there are so many ones that I've actually planned and then never done. where they never got off paper, where I just, scribbled them down in my notebook. There are some of those that it's like, I've been wanting to do this for 10 years. Now is finally the chance to do it. So there's definitely a long list of hypothetical trips that I, was hoping to do back in 2009. And for whatever reason, I never got around to it. And then in 2014, it's like, this is the year, and then something else comes up. So those ones, yes, absolutely. There are projects that I still have on the back burner that I hope to one day complete.
Cool. All righty, another one here. Let's where to go here? The chat keeps moving on me. Here we go. Ian Lindsay's asking, do you have a favorite location to explore in Canada?
No, I don't have a favorite location because I love all of Canada and I love the diversity here. All the different landscapes fascinate me, from the Carolinian forest in the south to the Arctic in the north, and everything in between, from Cape Breton Island to Vancouver Island. There's just so many good things to see here. I will say that, it's so hard to just pick one because I love it all, but I guess I have a strong affinity for forest. I love being in the woods among ancient trees. So wherever there's an old growth forest is where you'll find me. That's probably my favorite landscape if I had to choose one.
Excellent. All right, let's bring Jack Ferguson up here on panel.
So wherever there's an old growth forest is where you'll find me.
Jack, if you could please turn off your YouTube volume, and we'll get you back up here on panel again, okay? It's giving us feedback. Let's try. Jack, if you could please turn off your YouTube volume, and we'll get you back up here on panel again, okay?
All right, I'm trying to find it. I'm trying to find it, Dennis.
Bottom left-hand corner of your screen. You find that, and we'll get you up. In the meantime, we'll bring up Darren. Darren, how you doing tonight?
Great, thanks very much. How you doing, Dennis? Hi, Adam.
Hi.
Got a question, Darren?
Yes, thank you. So I remember reading, I think it was the Beyond the Trees book. You were mentioning part of, I guess, the impetus behind that journey was to celebrate Canada, the 150. I thought that was a really cool intro. Do you have any trips planned maybe for any other big milestones, like for Canada or for yourself personally? Like how much of that influences your decision to do something epic?
No, I don't have any more of those plans. That was kind of a one-time thing, and partly it was practical. I was thinking I could get funding because there was so much funding going around for 2017. I was like, this is definitely the chance to get some funding for this. And then I didn't end up getting any for that. I ended up having to do GoFundMe. So I haven't given any thought to doing any more anniversary type trips. But that's not to say that I wouldn't necessarily do that. It's actually not a bad idea. Maybe I should think like that. But all the expeditions I have planned for the foreseeable future are not based around any sort of anniversary or milestone. But again, one of the great things about doing adventures is you can't predict them. And I always sort of like to have things, what comes my way, don't pass up that opportunity. So some of the adventures and expeditions I get on, like the Whisper on the Night Wind, are kind of last minute things that just come up, where I just sort of randomly stumble across something, and then it leads to something I didn't expect. So I can't say for sure that's not in the cards, but I don't see it in my future right in the here and now.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I found it ironic in a sense that you had to even do funding, you know what I mean? Like, I guess back in the day, but now I imagine with your current position, do you have to do any fundraising at all, or are you pretty much set, I guess, eh?
Well, I don't have to do any fundraising for right this second, but if you're planning, depending on some of the nature of the projects, I could go over my budget, and then I would have to. If I wanted to do there has been some expeditions, more historical or ecological ones, where I'd like to have a whole team of people, but then the costs begin to multiply, and then I would have to go back to fundraising to figure that out. So I think I'm okay for the time being in terms of actually funding my expeditions. I'm not going to be going back to panhandling on GoFundMe right this second. But again, I can't predict long term. Anything can change in the future.
Fair enough. No. Well, thanks very much for letting me ask the question, and I appreciate your work, Adam.
Darren, before you disappear, Darren had another question earlier asking about your writings and if you've ever considered writing poetry.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, because some of your stuff, and it's very eloquent. Honestly, some of it is poetic, if I could, say that honestly. And I'm just curious if you ever, reached out in a different genre, because it almost seems, I don't know if natural is the right word, but I don't know. How do you feel about it?
I don't. So, well, first, I'm flattered by that, but I don't think I would have any talent for poetry. I think you have to really, almost be natural at that. So I'll stick to the prose, but no, but I'm flattered that you would say so. So thank you. And thank you for the questions.
Excellent.
Thanks very much.
Aaron, appreciate it. We'll talk to you a little later.
Sounds great.
So we did have a couple of others in the basement there that kind of drifted off. If you guys want to try and come back up, by all means, please do. And hopefully we can get the sound issues worked out. Are you still good for time, Adam? Or are we good?
I'm fine.
Okay, excellent. Because there's so many great questions here in the live chat that I don't want to overlook anything. Nate Muskoka once again asking, what are a couple of Adam's favorite Canadian folktales he's come across in all his research or true stories?
Well, that's a great question, and it almost leads itself to writing a new book on that subject, which I would love to do, but it's not entirely up to me. It's dependent on whether or not this book sells. If this book sells, then I can convince the publisher to bring out a book on that subject. But I mean, off the top of my head, I mean, there's some really interesting stuff on Wendigos, on early Sasquatch accounts that I find fascinating. There's a really spooky ghost story from the Mackenzie River, where a couple of fur trappers were transporting a coffin by dog sled up the river in the dead of winter. And at night around their camps, things seem to move about. So I love those kind of legends and things, and I would love to do more of that in the future, writing about those sorts of things, maybe in a new history book or something like that. Some of the other early accounts of early Canada, absolutely fascinating. The Vikings and Champlain, his diary is full of interesting stories. He's got one about a fish in the lake that now bears his name, which early historians were like, it's just an old legend. There's no basis for that. But I'm like, man, I think he's describing an alligator gar. And alligator gar nowadays are only found in the southern U.S. But if you Google an alligator gar, they're pretty impressive fish. And I think that there is some research to suggest that they once were found further north. And that might be what Champlain was describing in his diary, this incredible fish. And if so, that would be, a very fascinating account that this could be a description of an alligator gar in Canadian waters from 400 years ago. So there's a lot of cool stuff like that in the pages of early Canadian history. And I kind of allude to this sort of stuff in all of my books, not just the new one, but I sprinkle a little bit into the other books as well, some of these legends and folk tales. But thank you for the question.
Excellent. There's, you know what, people are intrigued by this, right? Josie, Adventures of Josie. Now, a little bit of back history on Adventures of Josie, and probably the reason why she asked you the question earlier about the Mattawa River is because she lives very local to Samuel de Champlain, and she has a love for that area as well. So, yeah, I bet you she's hoping that or wishing that she had met you. Anyways, is there a Canadian historic event or expedition that you wish you could have been a part of?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I would have to say, this. I don't want to disappoint anyone, but I would say no. So I guess I kind of like having the vantage.
Oh, Adam froze up on us here. Adam, if you could hear me, if you happen to come back, just pop back into the stream again. We'll get you back on screen. Is it just me, everybody, or has everybody lost Adam?
We're back.
There you go. Hey, welcome back. For a second.
Sorry, I guess there the count went down. Internet streaming or something, but a historical event in Canada's history or expedition I'd want to be part of. It's tempting to say yes, but I'm going to say no because I like the vantage point of the present day and sort of having, the bird's eye view of history and going back and looking at it. And I certainly appreciate doing the expeditions I do, the advantages of the modern gear. I mean, some of the old accounts you read, there's phenomenal. Like David Thompson and his voyageurs walking through freezing cold, icy water up to their chest, carrying 90-pound packs, and then sleeping on like a hunk of canvas or even out in the open with the temperature below freezing. So I don't know if I'd want to be part of that, maybe, but I'd rather go back in time. This is the historian in me or the academic. I'd rather go back in time in like a bubble or a time machine so I could watch them, but they can't see me, to see what they're doing and observing them rather than, being in their actual shoes. I always try not to be nostalgic or romantic about the past. I always think like, you get one life. This is our life to live. So let's make the most of it. We're alive right here. Life is so short, goes by in the blink of the eye. So don't romanticize the past, make the best of our own times, because probably 300 or 400 years from now, people will look back and say, wouldn't it have been great to have been alive in 2021? Think of how little they knew back then, all their primitive notions of things. So no, I'm happy being where I am, and I'll stay right here in the present for the time being.
Excellent. I see Jack Ferguson has popped back into the basement here. Let's try him. Oh, no, he's giving me one of these. He says, not yet. In that case, we'll go to a question by Wilderman Northern Adventures asking Adam, have you had any offers for TV shows or film productions?
Well, I guess it depends what you mean by an offer. It's not that uncommon to get emails from producers or people who want to develop a TV show. And I've certainly had many of those over the years, but I never really pursue them. I really think of myself as first and foremost, just someone who likes to be outside in the woods, in the wilderness. And secondly, as a writer. And those are my two great passions. So that's kind of what I want to stick to, just writing books and spending as much time in the woods as I can. And I don't really want to get too far outside of that. I have on the expeditions increasingly over the years carried more camera equipment and filmed things. And I've thought, hypothetically about editing some of my footage. And then I discovered that I don't really have any patience or talent for editing because it takes so long. So most of the footage I shoot on my expeditions doesn't really serve any purpose other than helping me to write my books. I do have one documentary, which is my Alone Across the Arctic, which is about my journey across the Arctic, which you can find online on Vimeo or Amazon Prime or iTunes. You can watch it on any of those. I haven't made any more films or anything like that, and I don't know if I will. Certainly I feel like, I have a lot of great footage of wildlife, bears and wolves and things that I should do something with. But, I have my hands full just writing my books, and I really don't have very much in the way of technical skills, as you can probably guess. And anyone who's done any video editing, it's a real skill, and it's very time consuming. So I don't really seem to make much progress on it. I'm going to try to put a little more videos up when I get the opportunity to do so. So I might do a little bit more of that down the road as well.
Is it safe to say that you mentioned you have a lot of footage of this expedition and this exploration? Is it safe to say that we probably won't see a video on YouTube for that, even though you have a lot of footage on it?
Anything is possible. Right now, I want to just focus on the book, but I did put up the footage that you showed at the start of our interview tonight, which I think is kind of nice because people who've read the book will be able to match up some scenes exactly. Almost word for word with the book with what's in the video. And I would like to, but it's really just the case that I'm so busy with the adventures and the projects I'm on. Tomorrow I'm visiting a school here in Ontario to talk to the students. And then I'm heading up to Sudbury and New Lisker to do talks there. And I'm always planning expeditions and writing. So sometimes I get so wrapped up in those things that I don't have the time to edit my footage. Like, I've been planning on editing footage from 5 years ago, and 5 years later, that expedition is still just sitting on a hard drive untouched. So really, I should probably get on top of that or figure something out, some way to make that happen. But no, I've just been focused on books for the time being.
That's a great way to keep that fresh in your mind and document it. Is by just like a video blogging your whole adventure, your expedition, because. Yeah, a lot of times if you write it down, do you ever have that instance where maybe you write something down and you just kind of lose focus on what it is when you go to read it back?
Well, I do both. So I try to take the most detailed written notes that I can, especially when it comes to more subjective things like your feelings or a description. Maybe some metaphor just popped into my head when I was looking at those mountains or this ancient volcano. and I really want to remember that and write it down, that it reminded me of this. So I do a lot of writing, and the journals form the basis for the book. So I go through the journals with a fine comb, and then I transform those into the books. But then I sometimes won't trust my memory, so I want to have the actual video footage, the GoPro footage, to go back and watch it. And sometimes I'll watch it very carefully and sort of freeze frame it in order to describe things as accurately as I can in terms of a waterfall or rapids or the landscape. I'm talking about a species or birds, so I want to make sure I get all that right. So I use that as sort of supplemental notes to the diaries when I'm writing the books.
Mm-hmm. Now you've also got you mentioned in your book, and this isn't really giving anything away, but you're snacking on a lot of berries and stuff like that. Are you pretty well versed in wild edibles and things of that sort?
Yeah, that's one of my great loves, is just wild trees and plants. That's something I do on an almost daily basis. Wild edibles and just spending time looking at lichens and mushrooms. Actually, once a year in the fall, because I started getting a lot of requests to do this sort of thing, so I decided to do it a couple of years ago. Is I do a guided hike in 3 different locations: one in Temagami, one in Algonquin, and one on Queenston on the Niagara River, which is a little bit different. But I do these 4 to 5 hour guided hikes, and I keep them small, no more than 10 people in a hike, and talk about wild mushrooms, how to identify edible mushrooms, poisonous mushrooms, lichens and moss and plants and trees and all these sorts of things. So that's something I do once a year, usually in September when the mushrooms are out. And I haven't figured out any dates for next year yet, but it will be on a weekend in September or early October, and I'll do them again. And anyone who's interested in that, they can sign up through my website by sending me an email.
Well, by all means, you have your first student. So when it goes up there, drop me an email because I'm signing up first. It never hurts to learn these types of things. So I'm starting to get pretty good at it myself, but it's nice to get some more pointers. We do have another person who has popped into the basement. I'm just going to run a little intro for that particular individual, and we'll get him up on screen for a quick question.
Hi, I'm Kevin Cowan, the Happy Camper.
Woo! Yes, I'm apostle number 14. Well, if you visited me instead, you would have been fine. It's a one sexy beast, I'm telling you. I called you poopy pants. Sorry about that.
Did you really?
I will hold in my urine for you, Dennis.
You have to remind Kevin that this is a family show.
What about the chipmunks?
Awesome.
Hey, Kevin, how you doing, buddy?
Hey! Adam, hey! Awesome!
So for those of you that don't know, Kevin, about a month and a bit ago, he also had Adam on a fireside chat, and they extensively discussed the book. Great interview, Kevin. Adam, by all means. So what do you got for us tonight, Kevin?
I got a quick question because I'm going back and forth tonight. I only missed pretty much all of the interview. Sorry. But I was like, no, I got a question. I know you're really, what's it called? Well-known reader of past books. So really quickly, 3 top reads that got you into writing. Go.
That got me into writing. Well, first off, thank you. I'm flattered by the question and that you tuned in, Kevin. But my 3 books that got me into writing. Well, the first wilderness book was probably Lost in the Barrens by Farley Mowat, because that was specifically for young adults. So I read that as a 13-year-old, and I remember it really fired my imagination and made me dream of wilderness adventures. And then I ended up reading Farley Mowat's other books as I got a little bit older. For Canadian history, it was probably Pierre Burton. The first Pierre Burton book I actually read was not a wilderness one. It was The Invasion of Canada, about the War of 1812. And Pierre Burton, I think he had a real talent for bringing people to life. The characters in his book seemed like real people, flesh and blood, and he did a great job bringing them to life. So probably on that front, it would be him. And then last but not least, I'm going to have to give a nod to Gothic literature. I always loved the spooky tales. And I remember in high school, my English teacher in the 10th grade introducing me to Edgar Allan Poe and The Telltale Heart, which is his story of a crazed murderer And reading that in the 10th grade had an impact on me. And then I ended up reading more Edgar Allan Poe. So that would be the third author I would have to cite. So thank you very much for the question.
That's really cool. The third one is amazing. So what was the one book during high school where someone told you to read because you had to for school, and you're like, are you kidding me? This really sucks.
Well, fortunately, we didn't read that many books in high school. They should probably assign more, and I remember all of them. In the 9th grade, it was The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. In the 10th grade, it was To Kill a Mockingbird. In the 11th grade, we read 2 books, both about Saskatchewan in the Great Depression, Why Shoot the Teacher and Who Has Seen the Wind. I remember nobody in the class liked those books. They thought they were boring, and I thought they were a little dry, but by the end, I felt like there was something valuable in both of them. And then in the 12th grade, we read The Great Gatsby. And I'm going to cite that one because that one I was really skeptical about. I remember I was like, come on, why do we have so much American content in our Canadian schools? Like so many American books here. 3 out of the 5 we read were American books. And this one was in New York City. So I was like, that's New York City, the last thing I want to read about. And I was so skeptical of that book. But being totally different from what I normally read, I would say that it broadened my horizons. And I felt like it was a really well-told story. I mean, there's a reason why it's regarded as a masterpiece. Even for a kid who loved the wilderness and the outdoors, I was kind of hooked, and I wanted to know what was going to happen at the end of that book. So I'd have to say, just reading books that are totally different from what we normally pick up, it probably broadened my horizons. So in the end, I'd have to say, all of them maybe wouldn't have been my first choice as a teenager, but reading them all, I hope, help give me a bigger perspective on things.
That's awesome. All right. So going back to this book, right? Sorry, it's really dark in here. I gotta get more lights.
Yeah, a little dark there, Kevin.
I know. I read by candlelight with a little toque in it. Anyway, so going back to this book, I was at the bookstore yesterday, and it's still right there on display. Are you surprised with that, or are you excited about that? Or you were like, oh, thank goodness I was right about that? Like, what's your feeling right now? Because it's been a few weeks now, right?
Yes. Well, I still feel like it's a little too early to tell. It's been 5 weeks maybe since the book has been released. It's done quite well. I think it debuted at number 4 on the Globe and Mail bestseller list for Canada. Peter Mansbridge, he had a book come out on the same week, so he was number 1. So it's nice that it had a strong opening, and it's been selling quite well. So obviously people are interested in the story, but still, I mean, 5 weeks doesn't make a book yet. So we'll have to wait and see if it does find an audience beyond that, and if more people pick it up. I mean, I hope so. It's a story that I wanted to tell regardless of whether or not anyone else would find it interesting, but I found it absolutely fascinating, and I wanted to tell this story. So I'm encouraged so far that it does seem to be appealing to some people, and hopefully that will continue. And what I like to hear most of all, I mean, it's great for people who are in the wilderness canoeing, camping community that they're finding the book and liking it, but I really like it when people are like, I would never have read this book. I only read romance novels, or I only read horror, slasher, or whatever. They only read a certain type of book, like me in that Great Gatsby back in the 12th grade. And then they're like, I actually enjoyed it. So that's what I really like to hear when someone like that comes along and they're like, I never would have read one of your books before, but I accidentally read this one because I was on a 7-hour flight and I had no choice, and it wasn't as bad as I thought. So that's always encouraging when I hear something like that. But yeah, that's my thoughts so far.
Well, so Adam, is that the big thing? Like, to me, you're not writing for the canoeist; you're writing for the reader, right? So, is there a certain point where you're like, I don't really care what the canoeist says, or what they think, or what the historian thinks. I'm just going to write it, and if you want to read it while you're flying somewhere and you enjoy the read, is that your carrot?
Well, I just try to write it. I try to appeal to the widest audience possible. So I certainly hope that canoeists and campers and people who love the outdoors will love these books. In some ways, I guess that's my most natural fit, my main sort of audience. But at the end of the day, I'm hoping that many other people will read these books from different backgrounds and different perspectives. And that's what I really like to see, is when people from all different walks of life who maybe wouldn't have naturally gravitated to a book on this subject matter stumble upon it and find something new and exciting. I mean, that's something I do too. I'll go into a bookstore and just end up picking up a book that I had no notion of beforehand, and it may be something quite different than what I wouldn't have been exposed to before. And then I'll end up saying, oh, I'm glad I picked up this book and read it, because this is something unexpected and something quite fun to read.
And just one more question, Dennis, and I'll let everybody go, because I know I'm taking over time here. So Adam, really, really important question. Are you going to get the beard really long, or are you going to shave it?
I just had a long beard in September. I've been growing it for like 4 or 5 months. It was long, and then I cut it off and cut my hair short again. So I tend to vary back and forth. I'm going to keep the short look and shave at least once a week for the winter, probably. And then when expedition season rolls around in the spring, then I'll probably take a break from that for at least 4 or 5 months. And then, so that's what I'll do.
Okay. Sorry. Great read. And this is a fantastic book. And also your map book is fantastic. I actually reread it last week while I was out on a trip. And and it was great when I'm around the hot stove and I'm reading the map book. Everybody's like, "Oh yeah, you're reading Shoalts, eh? Yeah." And I go, "Yeah, I just talked to him last week." Bullshit.
It's actually quite funny. I'm not sure if a guy that I know by the name of Tom is in the live stream tonight, but I was on one of Adam's posts on his Facebook page. And a guy, he's a friend of mine, actually was in there, and I told him that Adam was going to be on the show tonight, and he was pretty impressed. So, not sure if he made it or not, but yeah, it's amazing. I wouldn't have known that this particular individual would have been into reading this type of a book, but he says he's a huge Adam Shoalts fan. So there you go.
Well, so Adam, so that's another question actually. Sorry, I'm going off in tangent, whatever, but. Yeah, you've got what, 1, 2, 3, 4, like 4 books? No, 5. No, 5? Oh, 4? 4 really good sellers. Do you actually just walk in the woods one day and sort of say, "Oh my God, I never saw that coming"?
Oh, in terms of the books selling well? Yeah, I mean, I try not to dwell on it. I try to just sort of focus on the task at hand and do what I'm doing. So, I was just canoeing the Mattawa River, and I was consumed with canoeing the Mattawa River and researching the history of the Mattawa River and Alexander Henry and Daniel Harmon and these fur trappers, and reading their accounts from a quarter of a millennium ago. And then, going and looking at the cave and the waterfall and all this and thinking, this is amazing. This is fascinating. This is such a great story. And then I get sort of so swept up into it. Maybe the enthusiasm is infectious, and then that rubs off on other people through the books. And I don't really dwell on it beyond that. So I'm happy. I mean, when I write a book, if one person out there in the whole world of 8 billion people reads the book, then I feel like that's good enough. It won't have been in vain. So yeah, I don't really think too much about who's going to read this. I just sort of hope that if I find it exciting, someone else probably will too. That's kind of my mentality, I guess.
I got. Sorry, one more question.
Kevin, you're full of it, man.
One more, because I think that's a really good answer, and I'm a writer too. So, do you find that actually your people around you, like your wife, your family, whatever, don't really read your stuff at all and don't really know what you do, and other people do? Do you feel that?
To a certain extent, yes. Certainly some people in my immediate social circle, my family, some of them are bigger readers than others. So some of them read my books. I'll actually give them the manuscript beforehand and say, read this and tell me what you think. And, I'll get their feedback beforehand. But then some members of my immediate family are not such big readers, and I'm hesitant to say it, but I don't know if they've read any of my books. So yeah, I have to tread very carefully here because I'm in one of my family members' houses right now because I don't have high-speed internet. So I'm over at my sister's house, and I've never talked to her about any of my books. I don't know if she's read any of them. I should probably put that question to her directly and ask her what she thinks of them. So she does have a couple on the shelf behind me here. But on the other hand, I'm in her basement, so
They're not on display upstairs.
but yeah, I mean, I know that reading is not everyone's cup of tea, and I was just mentioning earlier that my close circle of friends are people I grew up with, and some of them are big readers and some of them aren't, and that's fine. I mean, there is the one option that's becoming more popular now, which is audiobooks. I've definitely seen more and more people saying to me, "Oh, I listened to your book," or I just took your book on audio on my canoe camping trip. So I think that is actually helping reach a bigger audience for people who wouldn't necessarily want to sit down with a book and read it. Now they actually have an option to listen to it when maybe you have a long commute. You spent, like truck drivers. Oh, I'm driving and I'm sick of listening to the radio. I'm going to actually listen to a book. So that's kind of a nice feeling. Knowing that some other people out there are getting to exposed to some of these stories, and maybe before they wouldn't have necessarily have been. So that's nice as well.
Mm-hmm. And on that same note, has Zach read the book, and has he given you his thoughts on the turnout?
Oh yes, absolutely. I mean, I gave him the book before it was published, and I said, read through it and give me any of your thoughts, and he did. And he has a pretty good sense of humor. He actually did a satirical rewrite of the opening and when he was introduced, which was quite hilarious. I don't know if that's ever going to see the light of day. But he was very valuable in terms of the actual expedition, in terms of the mystery of trying to unravel that whole mystery. He proposed some really good theories about what he thought it could be. And having his perspective on everything was really valuable. And as I said, he gave me his diary as well. So I had that with me. And then we had our GoPro footage as well to use. And he read it and his wife read it as well. So I had his feedback and her thoughts through him. He told me what she thought of it as well. So yeah, absolutely. I got their perspectives.
Awesome. Well, you know what? We're at 9:00, and I think it's going to be about time that we wrap the show up for tonight. Kevin, thanks very much for joining on panel. Feel free to stick around in the green room if you like.
And, fantastic. Really good read. You can't see it, sorry, I'm in the dark. Really good compliment. I gave this one to one of my students at risk the other day. He doesn't read whatsoever. And I said, read this book. And the next day, he gave it back to me. I went, well, you didn't like it? He goes, no, I read it last night. It was great. Thanks, Kevin.
In one sitting. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Impressive. It took me more than that to do it, but yeah.
I'm speechless. I'm not saying a word.
Okay, Kevin, we'll see you in the green room. Thanks very much for popping up.
Bye.
Awesome. Well, Adam, thank you very much for joining us tonight. It's been truly a pleasure. Love to meet you more than a drop and dash next time at the store. And maybe we'll sit down over a coffee and share a few more stories. That would be certainly a thrill for me to meet you in person.
Oh, sounds great. I'll look forward to paddling with you someday.
Yeah, I wish you all the success with this book and all your future endeavors and any other publications that you come out with. Just to tell everybody, you know what? I mentioned it earlier. I'm not much of a reader. Of late, I've been reading a lot more books because I've been having a lot of guests on that have had some great publications. Justin Barber, Canoe for Change, things like that. And you know what? This book is definitely worth a purchase. For under the $30 mark. You can find a link in the description below to this publication, and all of his other publications are also down there, as well as at the very top of the chat over there. You'll see a blue box. You can click on the link there, and by all means, you can also follow Adam on his Facebook page, Instagram, and he has a great website where you can keep up to date with all the things that he's got on there. He's got his speaking schedules and some videos scattered throughout. And as he mentioned, the foraging course, which I'm sure he'll be doing again in the spring, which I'm looking forward to for sure. So you can count on that, Adam. And by all means, throw Adam whatever kind of support you can, because he's doing some great things. I love this. He's going to places that we only wish we can go to right now. And you know what? Live vicariously through him. So there we go. Thanks, Adam. Appreciate that.
My pleasure. Thanks.
I'm going to drop you into the basement. Please stick around for a bit after the show. Have a quick little chit chat, and we'll talk a bit. And yeah, all
Sounds
good. See you in a few minutes.
Thanks.
Well, everybody, thanks once again for tuning in to Canoehound's Outdoor Adventure Show. You know, we're already at like episode 80, 85 or 86 here in the history of the show. And it's been great that we've had some fantastic guests on, especially this season. We brought on some real big names for you. I always encourage you to please drop me an email at canoehound@gmail.com and let me know. Let me just put that up here on screen. If you have a topic or a guest that you would like to see on the show, let me know. It certainly makes my job a lot easier to be able to approach an individual or a group of people to let them know that people want to see them on the show. So if you have any ideas, please do drop me an email at canoehound@gmail.com, and I would love to try and make a show happen for you. Just to let you know what we've got coming up in the next couple of weeks. Next week, we are going to be doing a panel special, and we're going to be talking about winter camping, and we're going to be incorporating a lot of you to come on panel and ask questions of the individuals I have up on screen throughout the entire show. What I want you to do is to be able to learn about winter camping, you know, the gear, the techniques, how to stay warm, what type of gear that you want. Whatever it is, it's always a good time to have you on screen. Let's make the show happen. We've done 2 episodes in the past, one last year and one in season 1. You can always go back in the video library to find those episodes and see what we spoke about on them shows. So by all means, tune in next week, 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and we'll have that for you. And then week after that, we have a very special treat for all of you. It's going to be a super fun show. Somebody that I know very, very well is going to be celebrating a birthday, and we're going to be doing a little bit of a fun, different type of show. You'll want to make sure that you, by all means, you join in on that one as well. But we'll give you more details on that next week. Anyways, once again, if it's your first time to the show here and you haven't already done so, please smash the thumbs up. It really helps with the algorithms with YouTube to recognize the show, helps share us out, makes the show bigger. And if you haven't already done so, hit that subscribe button, because we're bringing you great content all season up until, the beginning of summer, when we take a break and I get to go out and play. Anyways, with all that being said, thank you very much for tuning in this Tuesday night. And remember, people, please do keep the adventures alive. Until next week, see you then.